My stepson suddenly wanted a relationship after his mom died from cancer. I found her letter telling him to use me for money. I never thought I would be posting about my family issues on Reddit, but I could use some outside perspective. My wife, Sophia, passed away 2 months ago after battling lung cancer for 3 years. It's been the hardest thing I've 42 ever had to go through, but surprisingly, my relationship with my stepson, Ethan, 20, has unexpectedly improved in ways I never imagined possible. At least, that's what I thought until last week when I found a letter that's making me question everything. For context, I met Sophia when Ethan was 10 years old. His biological father, Michael, died in a car crash when Ethan was 5. From the moment I entered the picture, Ethan made it clear he didn't want me there. I tried everything to connect with him, helped with homework, drove him to soccer practice, cooked his favorite meals, attended every school event, but he constantly reminded me I wasn't his real dad and never would be. Making the situation even more complicated were Ethan's paternal grandparents, George and Lillian. They became heavily involved in Ethan's life after Michael died, providing financial support to Sophia and becoming Ethan's main emotional support. When I met them for the first time at Ethan's school play, their coldness toward me was palpable. They clearly thought Sophia had moved on too quickly, and they made sure Ethan felt the same way. I remember when Ethan was 13, he broke curfew by 3 hours. I grounded him for a week, a completely reasonable punishment. The next morning, I received an angry call from George telling me I had no right to discipline his grandson. Sophia supported my decision, but she was caught in an impossible position. She couldn't cut ties with George and Lillian because they were Ethan's only connection to his father, but their constant undermining destroyed any chance I had of building authority with Ethan. When Ethan was 15, he refused to join our family vacation, choosing to stay with his grandparents instead. I later learned they spent that time taking him to his father's grave and all of Michael's favorite places. After that, Ethan and I fell into a pattern of cold tolerance. We existed in the same space but barely interacted. Sophia tried to create family moments, but Ethan always found excuses to avoid them. Everything changed when Sophia was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer 3 years ago. For a brief moment, Ethan and I shared genuine grief when we first heard the news, but that unity quickly faded and he returned to avoiding me. I became Sophia's caretaker while maintaining my job to keep us financially afloat. The medical bills piled up, draining our savings rapidly. During this time, Ethan insisted on attending an expensive out-of-state university. Sophia tried to reason with him about staying closer to home, given her condition and our financial situation, but this led to a huge fight that left her physically and emotionally drained. Seeing how the argument affected her, I pulled him aside and made a deal. I would cover his tuition and expenses if he promised to keep the peace at home for his mother's sake. He agreed and even requested an off-campus apartment, which added to the financial strain, but I agreed because Sophia's well-being was my priority. I never told Sophia about this arrangement. She believed George and Lillian were covering the costs, and I let her believe that to spare her additional stress. As Sophia's condition worsened, I took a leave of absence from work to care for her full-time. Ethan came home during her final days, and although we maintained our distance from each other, he was genuinely caring toward his mother. When she passed, something unexpected happened at the funeral. Ethan approached me, thanked me for taking care of his mom, and we shared a moment of genuine grief together. He apologized for his behavior over the years and admitted his fear of replacing his father's memory if he accepted me. We agreed to build a better relationship moving forward. For the past 2 months, things have been surprisingly good. Ethan stayed for 3 weeks after the funeral and has called regularly since returning to school. He visits on weekends, and we've had real conversations for the first time in years. I started to believe we were finally forming the relationship I had always hoped for. Then last week, while sorting through Sophia's personal items, I found a letter she had written to Ethan before she died. In it, she urged him to repair his relationship with me because he'll be your only family after I'm gone, and you'll need his financial support to finish college. What hurt the most was seeing that the second paragraph about me was crossed out with angry pen marks. When I confronted Ethan about the letter during his weekend visit, he admitted to being angry initially, but insisted his feelings had genuinely changed since then. He claimed he now valued our relationship beyond financial considerations. I wasn't convinced, so I asked him to stay with his grandparents while I processed everything. Then I decided to test him. I texted him saying I could no longer afford his tuition and expenses due to the financial strain of Sophia's medical bills and my unpaid leave. His immediate response was a flood of panicked messages asking if we could talk, suggesting payment plans, offering to get a job. This reaction only fueled my suspicion that his recent affection was financially motivated. After consulting with close friends, I held firm and told Ethan my decision was final. A week has passed and I haven't heard from him directly. George called yesterday, furious about my abandonment of Ethan, but I hung up before he could finish his tirade. I can't help wondering if I've made a terrible mistake. Did I ruin a genuine chance at reconciliation? Or did I expose Ethan's true motivations? I still have enough in savings to help him, and there's money set aside for him in Sophia's will that he doesn't know about yet. I miss my wife terribly, and now I might have pushed away the only remaining connection to her. I've been staring at my phone all day, debating whether to call Ethan or wait for him to reach out. Was my test too harsh? Did I let years of built-up resentment cloud my judgment? I don't know what to do next. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their thoughtful comments on my original post. I read every single one, and they gave me a lot to think about. I've been processing a whirlwind of emotions and events over the past 2 weeks, and I finally have some time to update you all on what happened. The day after I posted, I was sitting in my living room, still debating what to do, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. To my complete surprise, it was Ethan. He hadn't called or texted that he was coming, he just showed up. When I opened the door, he looked exhausted. His eyes were red, and it was obvious he had been crying. He had purchased his own plane ticket home, which I later learned maxed out his credit card. Before I could say anything, Ethan asked if we could talk. We sat down at the kitchen table, and what followed was the most honest conversation we've ever had. Ethan admitted he understood why I had tested him and acknowledged that if our positions were reversed, he might have done the same thing. He explained that when he first read his mom's letter, he was furious not just at her suggestion that he needed to maintain a relationship with me for financial reasons, but at himself for how he had treated me all these years. Ethan revealed something I never knew. While his grandparents had actively tried to keep me at a distance, his mom had always spoken highly of me when they were alone. She told him repeatedly how I stepped up when I didn't have to, how I loved him as my own even when he pushed me away, and how I had been a rock for both of them. Her letter had initially made him angry because it seemed to reduce our potential relationship to a financial transaction, contradicting everything she had privately told him about me. After the funeral, Ethan said he stayed those 3 weeks because he wanted to see if what his mom had told him was true. During that time, he watched me maintain the home she loved, handle her affairs with care, and respect her memory in ways that surprised him. He realized she had been right about me all along. When I sent the text about cutting off his financial support, Ethan admitted his first reaction was panic, but he explained that it wasn't just about the money. It was the fear that I was cutting him off completely, that I didn't want him in my life anymore. He said he had already lost his biological dad, then his mom, and the thought of losing me too was overwhelming. After receiving my text, Ethan went to his grandparents for advice. This is where things took an unexpected turn. Instead of offering to help with his tuition, George and Lillian suggested he should contest Sophia's will, claiming I had manipulated her while she was ill. They even mentioned a lawyer friend who could help. Ethan said this conversation opened his eyes to how his grandparents had always tried to drive a wedge between us. That's when Ethan made his decision. He told his grandparents he wouldn't contest anything, packed his bags, and bought a one-way ticket home. He came back not to ask for money, but to tell me he wanted to be independent. He had already applied for student loans, was looking into scholarship options, and had lined up job interviews near campus. I was speechless. This was not the entitled kid I had known for years. This was a young man taking responsibility for his life and making mature decisions. When I asked why he hadn't just called to tell me this, he said he needed to say it in person so I would know he was serious. Then came my confession. I told Ethan about the money Sophia had set aside for him in her will, enough to cover his remaining education expenses. I expected him to be relieved, but instead, he declined it. He said he wanted to do this on his own to prove to both of us that our relationship wasn't about money. He even suggested that we save those funds for an emergency or for his future graduate studies if he decided to pursue them. We spent the rest of the day talking about practical matters, his job prospects, student loan options, scholarship applications. I offered advice when asked, but respected his lead on these decisions. For the first time, I felt genuinely proud of him, not because he was doing what I wanted, but because he was showing real character and independence. The next morning, George called again. This time, I answered and explained calmly that Ethan and I had worked things out and that he was choosing to become financially independent. George didn't believe me, insisting that I was manipulating Ethan. Before I could respond, Ethan asked for the phone. What followed was something I never expected to hear. Ethan firmly told his grandfather to stop interfering in his relationship with me. He explained that their constant undermining over the years had robbed him of the chance to have a father figure after losing his dad. He told them he didn't want or need their money if it came with strings attached. He ended by saying he would always honor his father's memory, but that didn't mean he couldn't also respect and appreciate me. When the call ended, Ethan looked drained but relieved. He said it was the first time he'd ever stood up to his grandparents, and though it was difficult, it felt right. We both acknowledged that this might permanently change his relationship with them, but Ethan seemed at peace with that possibility. Ethan stayed for a few more days before returning to school. During that time, we finalized his budget plan, and I helped him prepare for his job interviews. When I dropped him off at the airport, our goodbye was different from any we'd shared before. There was genuine affection and mutual respect. Since he's been back at school, Ethan has called every other day with updates. He got a part-time job at the campus bookstore and is applying to be a resident advisor next semester to reduce housing costs. He's also been approved for student loans and has submitted several scholarship applications. I'm still processing everything that happened, still grieving Sophia, and still adjusting to this new dynamic with Ethan. But for the first time in 10 years, I feel hopeful about our future as a family, whatever form that might take. I know this isn't the dramatic ending some of you might have expected, but I'm grateful for how things turned out. Thank you again for your advice and support when I needed it most. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. I appreciate everyone's supportive comments and messages during this time. Your insights helped me navigate some challenging moments, and I wanted to share where things stand now. Ethan has been thriving with his new independent approach to college. He secured the resident advisor position for next semester, which will cover his housing costs. Between his part-time job, student loans, and a small scholarship he was awarded, he's managing his finances well. He's even started a side hustle doing graphic design work for campus organizations. I've offered financial advice when asked, but I've been careful to let him handle things on his own. Something unexpected happened last month that I'm still trying to process. Ethan called me on a Sunday evening, sounding upset. He had gone to visit his grandparents for the weekend, the first time seeing them in person since our confrontation. He wanted to repair the relationship while maintaining boundaries. During his visit, he accidentally discovered something shocking. While looking for old photos in their home office, he found documents revealing that his grandparents had received a substantial insurance payout after his father's death money that was supposed to be held in trust for Ethan's education. According to the papers, they had been using portions of this money for their own expenses over the years, while giving the impression they were sacrificing to support him and Sophia. Ethan estimated that at least half of what should have been his educational fund had been spent. When Ethan confronted them, they justified their actions by claiming they needed to protect the money from me, fearing I would somehow gain access to it if they turned it over to Sophia after we married. They admitted they had planned to give Ethan what remained when he graduated college, presenting it as a gift from them rather than what was rightfully his. Ethan was devastated. Not only had they misused funds meant for him, but they had used their supposed financial support as leverage to control his relationship with me for years. All those times they positioned themselves as his saviors, while painting me as an inadequate provider. It was based on a lie. After this revelation, Ethan gathered the remaining financial documents and left immediately. He consulted with a lawyer, a college friend's parent, who specializes in estate matters, who confirmed that the grandparents' actions were potentially fraudulent. The lawyer suggested Ethan could pursue legal action to recover the misappropriated funds, but Ethan is hesitant to escalate the situation to that level. Instead, Ethan requested a formal accounting of the trust and told his grandparents he expected the remaining funds to be transferred to an account in his name only. George and Lillian initially refused, claiming he was being manipulated by me, despite the fact that I knew nothing about this when it unfolded. Eventually, they agreed to transfer the remaining money, approximately $45,000, but have since bombarded Ethan with messages alternating between guilt-tripping and anger. When Ethan first told me about this discovery, I was stunned. I had always known they disapproved of me, but I never imagined they would misuse Ethan's inheritance to maintain control over him and his mother. It explained so much about their behavior over the years, their extreme possessiveness, their insistence on being involved in every financial decision, their opposition to any major purchase Sophia and I wanted to make for the family. What surprised me most was Ethan's reaction. Rather than becoming bitter, he seems to have found clarity. He told me he finally understands how his grandparents manipulated his feelings about me from the beginning, using their financial support as proof that they cared more. He said he regrets the years we lost and the additional stress this caused his mother during her illness. I've been careful not to badmouth George and Lillian, despite this revelation. They're still Ethan's only connection to his father, and I don't want to put him in a position where he feels he has to choose sides. But I've made it clear that I support whatever decision he makes regarding his relationship with them going forward. Last week, Ethan informed his grandparents that he would be spending the upcoming holidays with me rather than them. It will be our first Christmas without Sophia, and while it will be difficult, I'm grateful we'll face it together. Ethan suggested we create some new traditions to honor his mom while also moving forward. As for Sophia's inheritance for Ethan, we've decided to leave it untouched for now. Combined with the recovered trust money, it will give him a solid financial foundation after graduation, whether for graduate school or starting his career. Ethan has insisted that any major decisions about those funds will be made together as a family. I still have moments of grief and loneliness without Sophia, but my relationship with Ethan has become a source of unexpected comfort. Sometimes I catch glimpses of her in his expressions or mannerisms, and it feels like she's still with us in some way. I think she would be proud of the man her son is becoming, and perhaps even a little surprised at how things turned out between us. Update 3. It's been exactly 1 year since Sophia passed away. I debated whether to post a final update, but so many of you have reached out asking how things are going that I wanted to provide some closure to this chapter of our lives. Ethan graduated a semester early with honors and has accepted a job offer in my city starting next month. He made this decision on his own, explaining that, after everything we've been through, he values having family nearby. He's found a small apartment about 15 minutes from my house, close enough for regular dinners but far enough for independence. I helped him move in last weekend, and as we arranged his furniture, we reminisced about Sophia and how she would have loved seeing this new phase of his life. The situation with George and Lillian remains complicated. After the trust fund revelation, Ethan maintained minimal contact with them for several months. They made multiple attempts to regain control, sending unwanted gifts, making surprise visits to his campus, and even trying to contact his employers and professors with concerns about his troubling behavior. Each boundary violation only reinforced Ethan's decision to keep them at a distance. 3 months ago, Ethan reached a breaking point and sent them a lengthy email explaining exactly why their behavior was harmful and setting clear conditions for any future relationship. He asked them to respect his independence, acknowledge their past manipulation, and apologize for misusing his trust fund. He also requested they seek counseling to address their controlling behavior if they wanted to be part of his life going forward. Their response was predictable denial, deflection, and attempts to guilt him by invoking his father's memory. Ethan forwarded me the email with a single comment. "Now I understand what Mom went through all those years." He decided to block their numbers and social media accounts temporarily, giving himself space to focus on his final semester and job search without their drama. Last month, out of the blue, a package arrived for Ethan at my address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Lillian, his father's wedding ring, and several photo albums of Ethan's childhood that we had never seen before. The letter was surprisingly reflective, not quite the apology Ethan had asked for, but an acknowledgement that they had perhaps been overly protective and failed to see how their actions impacted others. Lillian wrote that she and George were seeing a family counselor and asked if Ethan would consider meeting with them and the counselor when he felt ready. Ethan is still considering this olive branch. He's neither rushing to reconcile nor completely shutting the door. As he put it, "They're the only grandparents I have and the only connection to my dad. I'd like to have them in my life, but not at the cost of my independence or our relationship. As for me, I've slowly rebuilt my life while carrying Sophia with me. I returned to work full-time, joined a grief support group, which has been more helpful than I expected, and recently started dating again, something I never imagined doing a year ago." Ethan was surprisingly supportive when I told him, saying his mom would want me to be happy. Last week, Ethan and I visited Sophia's grave together on the anniversary of her death. We brought her favorite flowers and spent some time sharing memories. As we were leaving, Ethan said something that will stay with me forever. He told me that while he lost his biological father, too young to really know him, he was fortunate to have had 2 parents who loved him deeply: Sophia, who gave him life and unconditional love, and me, who chose to love him even when he made it nearly impossible. I'm not sure what the future holds for us. Ethan is embarking on his career, I'm cautiously entering a new chapter of my life, and we're both still healing in our own ways. But I do know that whatever comes next, we'll face it as a family, the family Sophia always hoped we would become.